In this video, I'm going to share with you my go-to questions for coaching anybody, anytime, anywhere, and leaving them massively transformed. Questions are the keys to the doors of the human mind. Your coaching client has infinite possibilities within them. Every one of those possibilities are tapped into through language. And questions for you as a coach, that's what directs the specific language that your client actually taps into so that they can actually generate those possibilities and ultimately transform their life. And so today I'm going to cover with you how I've leveraged those questions and which questions specifically I've used so you can tap into those same questions and get similar results with your clients. As I was coming up with documenting all the different categories of questions and the types of questions, my coaching got better simply because I created a compendium, a pile of all the best questions that I've asked over the years. Suddenly I've compressed all of that 20 years of experience into one single list. I'm going to share that list with you. You're going to have access to it at the end of this video. Now, let's get to the questions. Questions are the language of coaching. Thinking, as Tony Robbins used to say, is simply a matter of asking and answering questions. When I'm thinking or even talking, which is just showing my thinking, I'm just asking a question inside my head and then I'm answering it. Now, a lot of times as people, when we're in conversation, we just hear the answers. We don't actually hear the question being asked, but the question is there. Those words that come through as answers to the questions, they are reflective of the feelings, the spirit, the actions, the doing, being, and having within your client's life. When you can ask a question and tap into different conversations within your client, and those conversations reflect transformative aspects or reflect some change that your client needs or wants to make, that's the beginning of the change. There's all sorts of different parts of your client's mind. Rooms in the house of your client's mind. Fear room, an excitement room, a determination room, there's a courage room, an intelligence room, the solution room, an action room. Why does what your client is up to right now come through them? It's because they're asking certain questions that open those doors. They're keys to those doors in the rooms of your client's mind. And so when we have the most powerful potential questions to ask, your client's world expands. They unlock the doors to their mind, their life, their resources, their relationships, etc. And they can really blow the lid off of what's possible in their life. That's where transformation begins. You ask different questions, you're using a different key to a different door that unlocks different parts of your client and therefore unlocks new possibilities for your client's life and any part of their life. Obviously, the best thing you can do is have a great menu of these questions for a variety of different purposes so that you have it in front of you while you're in session and you can pick from that menu and ask these questions to really make a difference. Eventually, ideally, this is all part of your resident memory. Like you just have them in your memory bank, and because you're in a great state of mind, those questions just come through you. You're a vessel for these magical, powerful questions. You're probably not going to start out there though if you're a new coach, right? So write them down, get it on a sheet in front of you, and start asking these questions. So here's some basic categories of questions that I might employ in a coaching session. Problem and solution questions. Gosh knows that a lot of clients will come to you with problems and they're looking for solutions. So what are some questions I can use? Reframing questions. Reframing is simply a matter of shifting perspectives. And when your client has a perspective that's stopping them or getting in their way or that they're frustrated with, you want some reframing questions to help them to make a shift and change their perspective that could change their life. Metamodel questions. Metamodel is just a fancy NLP or neuro-linguistic programming term for questions that are hovering above all the aspects of the way that your client thinks through life. And they help us to parse out and be more precise and specific about what is going on inside my client. Think of these almost like diagnosis questions. There's be, do, and have questions. There's an entire neurological level hierarchy that I have discovered and that I employ to really move up the ladder from having to doing to being with my client. Because we know as coaches, the real action inside transformation in my client is in the being and maybe to some extent in the doing. So I want to ask questions that transform my client's being more importantly than transforming my client's doing and having. Beliefs and values, huge controlling and influencing forces in your client's life. What they believe is going to create limitations for them or create empowerment for them depending on context. Values are what's important to them. So you want to know their values, and sometimes your client needs to change their values in order to get what they want. So these are radically important navigational points or limitations in your client's life. And then finally, what I call hypnotic questions, which are ways to influence clients' thinking when they may be resistant or they might have a mental stop that generally keeps them from thinking in the direction that they need to empower themselves. And so I'll ask what I call hypnotic questions. Another way to say hypnotic questions is hypnotic commands. So let's start with these problem-solving questions. I'm going to want to ask questions of my clients sometimes to help them to solve problems. So I might ask a question like, what's not perfect yet? That question assumes that things eventually will be perfect, which is kind of fun, but it also gets my client to explain to me what really is going on that they want to change. Because sometimes people just generally complain about a problem, and you don't even know what they want to change or what's not working for them about that. So you ask a question, what's not perfect yet? What's not working for you about that? What's the real problem with that? These kind of questions can help just understand and diagnose what they think the problem is versus just what you intuit the problem might be, because you may not be on the same page with them. Another problem-solving question, what are you willing to do to make it the way that you want it? What are you willing to do? Now, this is very much a doing question. It's not the end-all be-all, but what are you willing to do? It's a simple question that can help them get a solution in the form of action. What are you willing to do to make it the way you want it? A great tag question for this is, hey, how could you enjoy the process? A lot of times the reason why somebody may not yet have been willing to do that thing or maybe hasn't followed through yet is because the process of doing it would be uncomfortable or unenjoyable or frustrating. It's like, hey, how could you enjoy that process? If a client that you're working with knows what to do but they're not doing it, the chances that they simply feel pain in the process of acting is very high. So if I ask you, how can you make it fun? What could you do to enjoy that very process that you just told me? What are you willing to do to make it the way you want it and enjoy the process? Well, now that's some powerful insights that my client is going to give me, chances are, if they're willing to answer the question. Final problem-solving question that I think is very empowering, and it's the other side of this, what are you willing to do, is what are you willing to give up in order to make it the way you want? What are you willing to let go of in order to make it the way you want it? When I ask this question, it gives me a sense of what is that client maybe holding on to, or what are they impacted by that if they just let go of it, they just let go of that control, they just gave up that game that they were playing, they kind of got off whatever position they're in, they could actually change their life. They could actually solve that problem. A lot of times problems for coaching clients that we work with are simply stingy or stuck ways of being within our client that if they just let that go and gave it up, they'd start solving that problem or the problem would instantly be solved. Now let's get on to these reframing questions. So reframing is a process of shifting perspectives. Depending on the frame I put around a situation, it might feel or look very differently. So if I have one perspective on a problem or argument or an issue, well, okay, that's one frame. But guess what? Every other human being on earth is going to have a slightly, if not greatly different perspective because they have a different point of view. They're not standing where I'm standing. They're standing where they are standing. So accessing different points of view, different frames of mind, or different frames on a particular aspect of your client's life, problems, goals, relationships, that's huge and very, very powerful to provide that could truly transform your client's life. One reframing question is, hey, what else could that mean? It's because your client's got all the meanings and the beliefs and the ideas that they have, and some of them are not going to be so empowering. Well, maybe just reframe it by asking, what else could this mean? Well, I guess it could mean this. Simple question starts to create a reframe. Another question that can reframe, what if that wasn't true? What if it was the other way around? This is a non-confronting way to reverse the perspective with your client because it's a what if. You're not saying, no, you're wrong, it's the other way around. No, you're wrong, that's a lie, that's not true. That's a way you can approach coaching for sure, that in-your-face style of coaching. Some people might say that's not coaching, that's bullying, right? But sometimes that's exactly what the doctor ordered. But if you want to have a really elegant way to have your client access the opposite, what if it wasn't true? What if it was the opposite? What if it was the other way around? And see what they say. Now, as I mentioned before, different frames of mind or different perspectives are many times owned by different people. So if you know your client has a particular mentor in their life, somebody that they look up to, somebody they want to be like, or they walk in certain circles where there's a certain hierarchy, where there's certain people that have more power or more influence or more satisfaction, fulfillment in their life or their business, you might identify one of those people, either generally or specifically, and ask, how would that person see this issue? Hey, I really look up to Lee Iacocca or Ronald Reagan. Well, how would Ronald Reagan see that problem? Or maybe let's say this person is a new lawyer and they're working at a firm where there's some partners that are very high up and they're very accomplished, smart, and they look up to those individuals. You might ask them, well, how would the partners at your law firm see that? It's not a specific individual, it's a category of people. Or, hey, how would a farmer see that? Or how would a wife see that? You're massively reframing things just by accessing different perspectives. More direct version of this reframing process could be, hey, what other valid perspectives might there be? Your client can start accessing other potential perspectives on whatever it is that they're looking into. Now let's move on to what NLP practitioners, neurolinguistic programmers, like to call the meta model. Tony Robbins used to call this the precision model because it's ultimately an overall set of questions to help you to diagnose specifics, precision diagnoses for what is going on inside your client's head or the way they see the world. The model in neurolinguistic programming is simply a representation, a representation of the world inside your client's mind. Through the five senses, your client, me and you too, take in the world. I see things, I hear things, I feel things, I taste and smell things, and those five senses gotta be represented. They turn into meaning. Well, when this person looks at me that way, that means that they hate me. When I get this paycheck, that means I'm successful. When I hang out with my family, that means I have quality time. There's all these meanings that we create, and how we create those meanings by taking the sounds and the pictures and all the experience of life, and we process it in our mind. And ultimately, then we create a model, a representation of the world. That is not the real world, but it is our best guess at the world. So when we meta model, this is a way to understand and to look down on that model and appreciate and see what is that representation that your client has about the world. Now, why would you want to use these kind of meta model questions to really diagnose or get more precise about what's happening with your client? Well, obviously you want to know precisely what's happening with your client, but sometimes your client just won't be able to tell you fully, or maybe your client doesn't even get it for themselves. Like maybe they're blurry about what's really happening there. Most clients are probably going to have that issue. So let's start with abstractions. Clients experience and think about life through abstractions. Again, it's this representation of the world. So when they share with me, yeah, I'm really unhappy, or I've really got problems, or I'm really frustrated about this one person in my life. Well, you might need to ask some specifying questions to take it from the abstract and get it to the specific and precise. So I might ask, well, what specifically are you unhappy about? Or what specifically is the problem today in your life? Or how specifically does Joe Bob frustrate you, right? Like, how is this person frustrating me? You didn't share that, so I have to ask the question to get more precise. Who specifically is a problem for you, or who specifically is frustrating for you right now? Maybe you didn't even tell me who they are. So who, what, how, these types of questions with the word specifically. Hey, can you be more specific? Obviously, there's a lot of variations on this, but you're getting your client to be more precise and get out of the abstract and get that abstract crazy painting, that Picasso, to turn into a Rembrandt, something that's much more 3D computer art, so to speak, CGI, that we can see very, very clearly, that actually reflects exactly what's going on. And again, your client may not even understand this stuff or know it clearly until they answer your questions. So that helps them discover more about what's really going on for them, rather than just being abstract and blurry about it, where they probably can't even solve the problem because they don't even know specifically what that problem is. Now, speaking of abstractions, your client also sometimes will be saying things or making statements or evaluations in a more universal way. I like to call these blanket statements. They're very generic, they're very generalized, and everybody makes some generalizations, but you want to know what are those generalizations, and you also want to challenge those generalizations sometimes because they create limitation for your client depending on the context. So let's say a client says, this always happens when I try to make more money. You could challenge that just simply by representing that back to them and saying always, and see if they can find a time, a counterexample, when that didn't happen. Hey, was there ever a time when that didn't happen? Have other people had times where that didn't happen, right? Try to get counterexamples of that. Let's say somebody says, everyone hates me, or everyone thinks I'm an idiot. You challenge that. Everybody, everyone. And again, you could ask for counterexamples. Who is a person that hasn't done that at least once? hasn't hated you or hasn't thought you were an idiot. And again, depending on the generalization and the absolutes that your client is sharing, always, everyone, every time, never, it never goes my way, right? All, none, etc. You challenge it with that all, none of them, never, always. And then again, ask for counterexamples. When is a time when that wasn't the case? Can you imagine a time when that wasn't the case? Can you imagine that that might not be the case in the future? We're taking those universal generalizations and we're getting them to be specific, and we're challenging them to more fully flesh out your client's map, model, or representation of the world, which is going to create insights for your client and more information for you on how your client sees things. Because again, we're challenging these things, but we're not telling them the answer. We're just asking questions. Now, your client has plenty of opinions, and the mental model can help you understand where those opinions stem from. So let's say your client says, money is evil. You might ask, according to whom? That gives you a sense of from where are they getting this information? Hey, yeah, that's the way I think about it. Or, well, my mother always told me that was the case. Also, for a very opinionated client, they might share something like, this is the way these people are. Or, I'm right about this because this is the way it should be. Once again, according to whom? Oh, well, that's according to me. They have to acknowledge when they just see it's just according to them that the world is not just according to them. And they understand and appreciate it, or to some extent probably will acknowledge mentally or in explicit language, that's their opinion. Now, you could also just say, well, that's your opinion, man, right? The way that the dude would say from The Great Lebowski, but that's probably not as elegant a way to elicit this kind of response. You ask, and then your client tells you, yes, that is my opinion. It's according to me. By the way, are there clients sometimes who will parrot things that other people have told them or maybe made them think from time to time that really aren't their thoughts? It's like somebody else gaslit me into thinking that I'm an idiot, or into thinking that I'm not that special, or into thinking that I can't make money, or into thinking that I can't have a great relationship. And then when they say, I can't have a relationship, or I can't have money, or I can't, and you ask them, according to who? And they say, well, initially that was according to my mother. Or the person that first told me that was this person, or the person that convinced me of that was my girlfriend or my boyfriend or whatever. Now, again, you may need to ask follow-ups to this because they may not get it. Well, no, I mean, that's what I really think. Whose words were that originally? Who first told you that? Who convinced you of that initially? Did you start out thinking that, or did you learn that at some point between age 0 and the age you are now, right? You may need to follow up with that to really get, this is an opinion that they have taken on that may or may not be theirs. And if nothing else, it may or may not be empowering. It's like, yeah, according to my mother, I can't make any money. Well, was your mother a great financial achiever? No, she did pretty lousy financially. Well, so you're using her as your role model for financial greatness? They can start to see the absurdity of their representation, their model of the world. Now, sometimes clients will complain about to what extent things are going bad or right or wrong for them. They'll talk about their life in terms of too much or not enough. And they will a lot of times be in victim mode and complain about their station. And so in that case, then you can actually access and ask them for comparisons. There's not enough money at this job. Well, compared to what other job? So everything that's too much or not enough, or there's a complaint about an internal or an external limitation, is always by comparison. Contrast can be a very empowering thing. You know what? I just don't have enough courage to do what it takes to find a relationship. Compared to who? Are there people that are less courageous than you? Or like in an external complaint, they might say, my life is way too uncomfortable for me right now. Well, compared to what other life? Compared to the third world? Compared to people that live in corrugated metal shacks in Africa? It's like drawing some contrast can help to just have them see how great things really are and how lucky somebody is. And then, of course, then you can build on that versus just having it be a victim statement or a complaint. And finally, this is one of my favorite meta model questions, probably the one I ask most universally. This particular set of questions comes up when your client hits a can't, a stop, a won't, a limitation in their mind or in their life. I can't make more money. I can't find the person that I want to be with. I won't make the change I need to make because it's too hard. The meta model question I would ask is, what's stopping you? Or what's preventing you from doing or being or having or taking that action? What's stopping you? What's preventing you from having that? What's preventing you from doing that? What's preventing you from feeling that? Make sense? This is a key to diagnostics, and it's nested very nicely inside the meta model. And when they share what's stopping them, they share why they can't, they share what's preventing them, now you know what needs to change. There's a follow-up to this that sometimes I'll ask, which is, what would happen if you did? Or what would happen if you could? Or what would happen if that was different? What would it be like if you could? This what if frame is so powerful because then they start to access this creative aspect, this intuitive aspect that all of us have at some level inside of us. And they start thinking about, well, if I could do that thing, or if I could find that relationship, if I could get that job, well, this was what would happen. Sometimes they'll say some really great things. Sometimes they'll say, well, gosh, if I could have that, then this would be a problem because then I'd be scared of this. Again, we're meta-modeling. We're looking at their model of the world, and we're looking at all the artifacts of what if they did do something that they said they can't or won't, where they're stopped. On the other side of that, sometimes can give you a clue to why they're stopped, or give you a clue to why they would even want to transform that in the first place. Make sense? Very powerful questions in the meta model. A great way to get the map of what's going on inside your client in precision ways so that you can then help them to make changes. Next, we have be, do, and have questions. And again, you can simply ask, hey, what would you like to have? What would you think you should do? And who should you be so that you can do and have those things? Like, those are kind of obvious, and those are great starting points, no doubt. But there's more facile ways that we can ask these types of be, do, and have questions. And the method that I love to leverage, and I've also seen Tony Robbins leverage this as well for many years. Whenever I've seen Tony Robbins actually provide a magical transformation for somebody, he levitates into being and doing from having very quickly and easily by leveraging what in NLP they call the neurological levels of change and the neurological level questions as well. And these are different levels in our mind that kind of have a hierarchy to them, and they actually cause changes to occur in lower levels. What I'm going to show you now is a model of these neurological levels. I'm going to talk through a few of them. So the bottom level is where the having happens. The top level is where the being is. It's kind of like the master of all it surveys. And so at the bottom level, you can ask questions like, hey, what do you want to have? What do you have already? What's your circumstances? This is all circumstantial stuff. It's all very stuck in circumstances. And this is where your client can enjoy circumstances, but also where they can be a victim of circumstance as well. So we want to gravitate and elevate one level up to doing. This is the level of action, of doing. So you might ask questions like, what do you need to do so you can have what you want? Or what are you already doing to solve this? Or what do you do day to day that's most important for me to know? These access the activity. When people don't have what they want, they usually get into action, or at least they think about actions. It's like, gosh, I don't have the money, I don't have the relationship, I don't have the body. They start thinking about, what could I do? It's a very simple elevation. And by the way, even if you hate what you have right now, or if you're a total victim of that circumstance, you can still do something. You can still act. And so that could be a real saving grace. That could be a real enlightening place to think, to go from having to doing. It's like, well, what are you going to do about it? All of a sudden your client starts thinking, wow, yeah, what could I do? Instead of being a victim, now they're thinking past that victim mentality to action, to something that could be constructive. Now, the challenge is sometimes there's nothing you can do, or sometimes they're already doing everything they can, and there's no like tactical changes to make. And unfortunately, some coaches get stuck at this tactical level. They get stuck just talking about having, talking about doing, talking about having. This is more like the consulting level of question asking. And we want to move up to being. And this lowest neurological level within the being category are skills and capabilities. Why? Because skills and capabilities really speak to action. Like if I have the skill, I could use the action. It opens the door to action. Make sense? Capabilities, like, hey, if I'm capable, then the action is possible, right? Hey, if I'm not taking action right now, but I'm capable of taking action, that is a real saving grace for me. If I haven't been doing what I need to do, I'm not in action on it, or I'm not in enough action, but I'm capable of taking the amount of action I need to, or if I have the skill to do it at least, that could be pretty darn exciting. That could start to extend down into doing and then ultimately having, because I'm being capable, I'm being skilled. Make sense? So I might ask, hey, what are you capable of that you haven't yet done that might make a difference? Or are you capable of changing this? Or, hey, what have you found in the past that your capabilities have demonstrated that have made a difference for you in challenging times like this? Asking about capability starts to access identity. It starts to access being inside your client. Hey, do you think that you're skilled enough to do what it takes? Do you think if you took action, you could generate the skills? What skills do you need to take on that would make a difference so that you could take actions that are needed and be effective? These kind of questions, access skills and capabilities, start to gravitate towards being, but they're still connected with doing. That's really why it's the lowest neurological level in the being category. The next neurological level within the area of being are beliefs and values. Now, beliefs and values have their own set of questions, so we'll get into that in a second. But the bottom line is, if I don't believe it's possible, if I don't believe in myself, if I don't value certain things, I'll never come up with the skills and capabilities so I can take the action and have what I want. Make sense? So beliefs and values are the doorways to everything below it. It's a processional effect. There's a downstream effect from the top down, from beliefs and values to skills and capabilities to doing and action to having and circumstances. Make sense? Some people are simply not skilled enough or don't take enough action or both, and therefore they don't have what they want simply because they don't believe it. They don't believe in it. They don't believe in themselves. They don't value those things. Different values, different beliefs, different skills, different actions, different life. So we'll get to those in a second. Let's move on up the neurological levels to the next neurological level that does impact being, which is identity. Now, identity is kind of a belief, but it's like the ultimate belief because it's beliefs about who you are and what you're capable of, to be fair, but what's possible for you and what you deserve. All that's cropped up in your self-definition, the way you see yourself, the way you define yourself, and what you believe about yourself in a variety of ways. So when we start accessing identity, who are you really? Who are you that could handle this? Who could you be or become that would allow you to believe and value what's required so you can accomplish what you want? Does this make sense? These are very common questions, the being questions. These are like the pure being questions. But think about it from the perspective of, first of all, identity, definition. How do you clarify yourself? How do you define yourself? That identity is going to massively impact beliefs, values, because different people, different labels, so to speak, different roles will have different values. If I see myself as a financial wizard that is the ultimate stock market trader, I'm going to value money and efficiency and strategy and Wall Street a lot more highly than if I believe I'm the ultimate Mr. Mom and I'm the ultimate caretaker of my children, right? I'm going to value my kids a lot more and connecting with them probably a lot more, at least in that role. Does that make sense? So beliefs and values are slaves to identity in a way. And then ultimately skills and capabilities are slaves to beliefs and values and on and on and on down the neurological levels. So if I can help to transform or ask questions to access, at least understand my client's identity, how they define themselves, how they clarify themselves, how they label themselves, the role they believe they play in this part of their life contextually or cross-contextually, I got some power here. Another aspect of identity questions might be, what do you deserve? If somebody doesn't even think they deserve something, it's like, how the heck are they ever going to believe or value what's required so they can generate skills, capabilities, and actions and actually have it? Even if they do have it, they'll feel horrible about it, chances are, and that's not what they want either. So, hey, what do you think you deserve in this area? Who are you that actually already deserves this? Do you deserve this or not? And you might find some real limiting thought processes way up in the being category. And then finally, inside of being, there's also possibilities. Ideas or beliefs about what's possible for that particular individual. Hey, what do you think is possible for you in this area? Is there something that's not possible for you that's possible for other people with money or with relationships or with your career? And they're going to tell you, and then you want to work with them on transform. Hey, what do you think would change those possibilities? Like, why do you think those possibilities are the way they are? And you start getting into belief and values questions about that specific aspect of their identity. These are the neurological levels that I've seen for myself and Tony Robbins and other really great master coaches use that radically just rip to shreds whatever seemingly impossible roadblocks and challenges and things that stop people and just rip that to shreds. In fact, if you want to see Tony Robbins do this, watch the Netflix documentary, I'm Not Your Guru. The first scene after the intro scene is him talking to a woman who's talking all about her diet and how she's trying to work through all these issues around her eating schedule and all this stuff. All this, fairly superficial stuff, although obviously it still has an impact. And so Tony Robbins, I'll remember this, he hears her talk through this, and you can see he's about to get muddled up in the low level, like doing and having. Like, I have this schedule, I do this diet. It was all doing and having. And obviously that's not going to transform anything. So he asked her one simple question. What's life about? Let me ask you this. What's life about? Now, what level of the neurological levels is that? Probably beliefs and values. It's what is important in life. What's the most important in life? Can't remember exactly how he phrased the question. It was either what's life about or what's most important in your life. Some variation on that. But it's the same question, right? So he went from her doing to being. And you could see her eyes like dilate, and you could see her visualizing. And she said, well, life is about doing what scares you. Life is about making a difference. Life is about breaking through. And you could hear all these models in her mind, all these elements that have created all the rest of this stuff, all the doing and having. And he started asking, he meta-modeled what's going on at that level, at the values level. What prevents you from having that? What do you need to do in order to accomplish that? And she started talking about all this stuff about her father and how she needs to please him and she needs to deal with her relationship with him. Massive breakthrough. Totally transformed that woman's life in like 10 minutes. So when you pick and choose where you go in terms of powerful questions on the neurological level spectrum, you can break through to a deep coaching conversation instantly where everything 2 seconds ago was on the surface. It's one of the most powerful ways to go deep with your clients is ask questions that are in this lineage, this hierarchy of neurological levels. Going higher on the neurological level hierarchy, generally speaking, will have you go deeper with your client. Make sense? Now, above all these personal neurological levels, there's also a neurological level where we access connection with the world, connection with a higher power, connection with humanity, a bigger purpose, contribution, something spiritual, a vision, a mission, something beyond yourself. This is like the universal spirit that, as many spiritual coaches, we want to support our client in accessing. So when you ask questions that tap into relationship, community, mission, vision, spirit, ultimate destiny, all this kind of stuff that's outside your client, they go above and beyond themselves. They start tapping into something greater or bigger than themselves. Who are you spiritually? That'd be a great question to tap into that. What does your community need from you? What is your ultimate mission in life or your vision for your life? These elements surrounding your client, they're not your client, right? But they're things your client relates to, are above and beyond all these different levels of identity and doing and having. And so when they tap into that, it expands who your client is to encapsulate those conversations. That can transform all these other levels below it. Okay, that was a lot to swallow, but does that make sense as far as how you can really go deep and transform your client using questions that are couched in or nested in those different neurological levels? This is the strategic way to ask questions of your client that get them to break through and have ahas and insights that are way above and beyond just dealing with the low level doing and having. And you can still work with them on those levels as well, of course. Now, I have an entire playlist that covers neurological levels, and I'm going to link that in a tag here. But in addition to that, I have a couple articles that I personally wrote about going deep, like actual deep coaching with clients. And eventually we might have a video on this, so I'll relink if we ever get around to making a video based upon those articles. But I am linking to the articles right here in a tag. Check those articles out because they're going to give you more of a general overview understanding of how do I think about going deep with a client and how can you do that even without these neurological levels that we just talked about. Now let's get into belief and values questions. These are gigantic. I mean, there's questions to discover what beliefs and values they have. There's also questions to transform beliefs and values. So in general, you might ask them things like, what does that mean? What does that mean to you? How do you define that? If you want to get a sense of what their reference beliefs are for something they already have shared a belief around, how do you know that's true? Why is that? Why questions are great to just discover what's beneath what they're telling you. You might discover their values by asking things like, what's most important to you in terms of blank, in terms of your life, in terms of your relationship, etc. And they'll share what's most important to them. And if you ever want to know what it takes for them to experience those values, that's about rules. Rules are simply if then, like this is what has to happen for me to, have love or to have a lot of money or something like that. So you might ask them, hey, what has to happen for you to feel love, for you to have fun, for you to take it easy? Whatever it is that they value that maybe they don't have or they have, and you want to understand what's going on with that. Now, in order to transform beliefs, you need to ask different questions, like things that would motivate them to shift a belief. Like, how much more pain will you have in your life if you continue to believe this? What would be the worst thing that would happen if you maintain this belief that limits you in your life right now? What has already occurred? So concrete consequences and the feelings, like how would that feel if that continued? How would that feel if there was the worst case scenario that came out of you perpetuating and continuing to perpetrate that belief, to believe that belief, to buy into that lie? What's not true about that? How is that really not true? So you're shaking that belief up, and then you're also asking questions to help them tap into motivational resources to motivate them to shift that belief. What should you believe? What would be a good belief to have? What do you also believe that maybe would empower you in this area? That elicits new beliefs. So all sorts of different belief transformation questions that would be very, very powerful to work with, discover, and ultimately transform beliefs. Values-wise, this is more strategic. Hey, what should you make more important or you'll fail at this? Hey, what needs to be important that you haven't made important yet? What should be less important in terms of what you've already said is important to you? What's maybe too important that if you kept that as your number one priority, it's really going to hurt you in this area or maybe prevent you from getting what you want? Make sense? So these are more strategic values transformation questions to have them start to move values or add values. Hey, what else should be important that you haven't even thought of yet? What shouldn't be important at all? You should take off of your values list because it's really getting in the way. Finally, as I mentioned, every client has rules that are gateways to them experiencing their values, strategies, ideas, goals, things that they need to see happen, or else they're not going to feel whatever they want to feel or experience what they really truly value in their life or their relationship or whatever. So when you discover what those rules are, usually these rules make it really hard for them to experience what they want in life. And so I might want to ask them, hey, what would be a better and more empowering rule so you could have more of what you really want, and have them discover and discuss different rules that they could set to really change the way they look at this. And that kind of question will help them to discuss, come up with, and ultimately maybe commit to having a different belief, a different rule that would empower them in actually having more of what they want in their life, or the relationship, etc. Make sense? Now, in the description and maybe in a tag, I'm going to link some articles that Dr. Coiner has written about values and rules and beliefs that I think will give you even more detail, not just asking questions about this stuff, but actually like working with your client and discovering and understanding what are the mechanics of beliefs and values that really have an impact in a client's life. Okay, final category of questions that we're going to talk about today in these powerful coaching questions are hypnotic questions. Now, as I think I might have mentioned before, I think of these as commands that are hidden in a question, suggestions at the least that are hidden in a question. When you are in the middle of direct communication with a client and you're just telling them to do stuff, you're telling them to think or feel a certain way, 9 times out of 10, they're probably going to resist that. If they already were doing it, then you're just saying what they're already up to. But if they weren't and they really have things that prevent them from experiencing that, you telling them to do it, unless they really worship you as a coach, and most coaches are not prophets in their own land, it's probably not going to really do much. So instead, and ask questions that have them tap into those resources. And these are hypnotic suggestions, hypnotic commands that are couched in questions. So there's 2 parts to this. The first part is the thing that demonstrates it's a question. And then usually later on in the question, there's a suggestion or a command that is actually what you're attempting to influence them into experiencing, feeling, or doing. So for instance, let's say I want them to feel a sense of peace, and they haven't been feeling peace in their life right now. I might ask them, hey, what's it like when you feel peace? Now, again, 2 parts of that question. There's the question, what's it like when? And then there's like the command or the suggestion, you feel peace. And depending on how I use tone and my tempo, hey, what's it really like when you
feel peace? Right? That doesn't maybe sound like a normal way of asking the question, hey, what's it like when you feel peace? But that different tempo, even though it might sound a little odd, usually that doesn't get processed consciously. The unconscious mind experiences that command to feel peace differently because of the tonality and the tempo that I used, and it goes deeply into their unconscious, and they start tapping into what it's like when they feel peace. Even if that doesn't really work, if they just answer the question like, well, it's like this when I feel peace, they're starting to talk about it. Now they're accessing that feeling. Make sense? I've basically gotten them to tap into that to the best of my ability without telling them to do it. Now, this can also go along with not just any state of mind, like feel peace or feel excited or feel desire or feel satisfied or feel fulfilled. It could also be like things that they do, like, hey, what's it like when you work 10 hours a day if they need to do that? What's it like when you accomplish this really important thing that you've accomplished in the past? Obviously, this type of patterning in this hypnotic questions realm is for already established patterns that are already well oiled within your client. If they've never felt peace and you ask them, what's it like when you feel peace? They're gonna be like, I don't know what it's like because I've never felt it. If they've never worked 10 hours a day and you ask them, what's it like to work 10 hours a day? They're like, I don't know, I've never done it, right? So already established patterns, if you know they've already done it in the past. And by the way, I might even want to ask them before I use this hypnotic question, hey, have you ever worked 10 hours a day? Have you ever felt peace? Oh yeah, I felt it before. Great, what's it like when you feel peace? Make sense? So I'm looking for that already existing resource, and then I'm asking the question to get them to tap into that resource. I've elaborated on this process of tapping into already existing internal resources within your coaching client in this video here. I'm going to link it somewhere in a tag. I don't know which direction I should point, but it's popping up right now in the video. So check that out, because that will go in much more detail around the preface to this question that you could ask. And just to clarify, if I really don't know if my client has ever experienced that, I'm just going to ask them, have you ever felt this, done this, etc.? And by the way, that unto itself is a little bit of a hypnotic question or hypnotic command. Have you ever felt peace? Have you ever felt deep love? Have you ever worked so hard that you accomplished so much more than you ever thought you could? Now, again, this is, the predicate is in the past, felt, done, etc. You could shift that. Have you ever been in a place where you feel peace? Have you ever actually seen yourself accomplish lots of things quickly? Then we're back to present by just adding another predicate, and we're putting that other command in a phrase that is now pushed into the present. Hopefully you saw what I did there. But either way, it's pretty impactful for two reasons. Number one, it gets them to tap into that resource if they ever have. And number two, if they haven't, they got to say no. And now they've never done it. So what about if they have never felt peace or felt love or done the work? These are unestablished patterns, but they're still patterns in the human experience. How can you get your client to tap into those even though they've never experienced it? Well, I'd ask a different hypnotic question, different hypnotic command in this case. What would it be like if you were to feel peace? What would it be like if you were to work really hard and accomplish all your goals? What would it be like to actually feel deep feelings of love for your wife or husband? Make sense? Now we're in imaginary land. What would happen if, or what would it be like if you were to, and again, present tense command to experience it with that kind of intonation could be very powerful. So I hope these questions really helped you. I'm going to give you a link to all the questions we've talked about in a Google document that you can actually access and copy for yourself, so you can add your own questions to this, and you've got menus of different categories of questions depending on the client or the situation or your approach to coaching that you can tap into, then print it out, put it on your wall, and leverage these to really transform your clients' lives. And what are the questions that you use that I haven't covered, I didn't talk about, that you think are even more powerful, or at least somewhat powerful for you to ask in your coaching sessions that you have with clients? Put them in the comments. I'd love to hear them. Let's actually get the conversation going where we can learn from each other rather than just me dishing out these questions to you. If this made a difference, please give us a like. This helps us to reach more coaches or managers or executive coaches or personal coaches, life coaches that are out there making a difference in the world. They'll make an even better difference when they got access to these tools. And if you want to see more deep dive videos like this, let me know. Put it in the comment that you want more, and then I'll do more. I need to hear from you. If nothing else, if you want more of the videos that I'm going to be posting in the future, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and hit the bell. I'm going to send you a notification when I post the next video, which will probably be in a week or so.
Problem or solution, which is in your sight. Coaching questions pave the way, unlocking what's right. Reframe your perspective, see with a new view. Transformation starts with questions, guiding you through. Questions hold the key, the power to transform. Unleashing your potential, taking you beyond the norm. Ask and explore, the answers lie within. In the realm of questions, your journey can begin.